Hello, everybody. Wow. Here we are. Welcome. I'm excited that you're joining me tonight for Food Addiction. Fair and firm. As you know, FAIR stands for Food Addiction is Real. Firm stands for Freedom is Recovering Mindfully. And we're all seeking freedom from the bondage of our addictions because they do bind us. They keep us from living life fully. And we want to experience life fully, and I want you to experience life more fully. So welcome. Thanks for joining me for this weekly educational and conversational discussion about food addiction. I'm Dr. Connie Stapleton, and I've worked professionally in the field of recovery from all sorts of addictions for the past 25 years. I'm also very grateful to be able to say I've been in my own recovery from addiction for 28 years. And that is why I do what I do, because I want you to know the joy and the freedom that comes from living a program of recovery from addiction. So, tonight, oh my goodness, right before I logged on here, I was looking at some fun things that I'll be sharing with you both online and during these programs, the Food Addiction Firm and Fair programs in the weeks to come. But I was looking at various recovery formats, forums. I was looking at Overeaters Anonymous. I was looking at, what's it called? It's called Smart Recovery. I was looking at Food Addicts Anonymous. And so I want you to know that over the course of this program, which I believe is going to be for many years, we're going to tap into each one of these available resources because I believe that we're going to get information and useful things that we can add to our recoveries from all of these programs. So again, I'm of the mind that do what works for you. Within limits, of course, but whatever works for you, do it. Find a way to be abstinent from those trigger foods, those foods that con you, that suck you in to the place where your brain is hijacked and you're not thinking clearly and you're not able to make the best decisions. For some people, that's whole categories of foods, and for other people, it's just particular foods. So you got to decide for yourself what those trigger foods are. But remember, addiction means you can't just take it or leave it. And once you start, it's often much more difficult to stay away from those kinds of foods. So, in recovery programs, when you're addicted to certain foods or for certain substances or certain behaviors, abstinence has got to be the first step for that. So tonight I kind of wanted to go through what kind of pick up where we left off last week, and that's what I'm kind of trying to do. Rather than have a set agenda for these meetings, I kind of want to go where the current takes us. So I'm paying attention to the feedback from people online. I'm paying attention to the questions, to the feedback you give one another, to the great suggestions you give one another, and just trying to go with where people seem to be at. So I wanted to pick up with the control issue from last week because it's a funny thing. The word sort of has a negative connotation for a lot of us. You know, it's like, oh, you're a control freak, or stop trying to control me, stop trying to run my life. And we talk a lot about getting control over this addiction. And last week I was talking about how important it is to give up control, to gain control. Meaning we have to get ourselves from living in this closed off world, this world that's all focused on controlling food and calories and grams and numbers and whatever, to regain control. And my good friend Laura Preston has a wonderful program called Regain Control. And that's the whole premise, you know? It's like we have to give up this false sense of being able to control this thing that we cannot control because it's bigger than we are, it's more powerful than we are. Remember I said last week that addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It makes no sense to somebody who hasn't struggled with addiction, whether it's food addiction or any addiction. And that's why a lot of people who come in for bariatric surgery evaluations say their family members just don't understand. They think they can lose weight whatever they call the natural way or the easy way. There's nothing easy about weight loss, no matter how you go about it. There's nothing easy about giving up foods that you're addicted to if you have an addiction present. So control is not what we're looking for. We're looking for letting go of this control so that we can open our minds, open our worldview, open our experience of the world without having to Overeaters Anonymous, because I've read their book a couple of times and they have some wonderful information. And I'm not, encouraging the use of Overeaters Anonymous over anything else. I'm going to go through, like I said, I will include aspects of all these recovery programs, but I'm going to start by using the Overeaters Anonymous book. And I'm not going to read it to you. You're big kids, you can read the book yourself. But I'm going to kind of point out some things focused on this whole idea of control and trying to have willpower, thinking that willpower alone is going to be able to set you free from addiction. That's ludicrous. It will never happen. One of the things that I talk about in this 10-week class that I do called Gain While You Lose is we're talking about changing your thinking. And one of the slides that I use is that I use talks about the difference between willpower and skill power. There's nothing about recovering from addiction that's got anything healthy to do with willpower. But there's a lot to do with recovery that has to do with skill power. And when I use the word skill power, I use that word in the sense of meaning you have to learn a lot of skills if you're going to find any sort of peace of mind or larger ability to live life fully in your recovery from addiction. So again, I'm not talking about controlling this thing. And in the Overeaters Anonymous book, they talk about being able to control, because so many people have a history of trying to control their eating. And the truth of it is, and they point this out, and this is straight from the book, The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions of Overeaters Anonymous. A lot of the information I'll be talking about tonight comes from that book, along with my many, many years of work in this field. But they say that at one point, or at various points in time, people believe they're able to control their eating, and so it seems that they are able to do so. The thing is, it doesn't last for very long, right? What do we say? We say the old habits creeped back in, or the weight crept back on, or life got busy, or I didn't have time, or I didn't make time, or my mother got ill, or my husband got a new job and we relocated and I was just too busy to pay attention. Well, the reality is life is going to remain busy. Life is going to remain crazy and hectic and whatever. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life. There's no controlling addiction. All right? So if this is truly an addiction, it's not just that the weight creeps back on. It's not that just you slip back into old habits. It's usually the case that you engage in some food that's a trigger food for you, and your brain reacts to that, and then you want more and more and more. And I don't mean in one sitting necessarily like a binge, although that may be part of it for some of you, but I mean that brain is triggered. And if sugar or a white flour or wheat or whatever it is causes that reaction, this abnormal food eating reaction in your brain, then it's going to turn on those cravings so that you're wanting more and more and more of those kinds of food. So maybe for a while you thought you could control your food, but the reality is that we learned that a lack of willpower is not what makes people addicts. It's not about a lack of willpower. And this was, tried and true with alcoholics for many years. They thought that, and the public thought, and physicians thought that this was a matter of moral character, or this was a matter of willpower. But it absolutely isn't. Because the truth is, you've probably shown exceptional willpower, and that's what the Overeaters Anonymous book says, in many areas of your life. But this is not something that you chose to have, that you would have selected to have, any more than a type 1 diabetic would have chosen to have type 1 diabetes, or a type 2 diabetic for that matter, or anybody would choose any illness. It's something that you most likely had a genetic predisposition for, or sometimes in the cases of a psychological addiction, you came to rely on food and thought that you needed it. But addiction, of course, is physiological, in that there's a lot of brain involved in it, and that has been proven through research, through neuroscans, through brain scanning. It's very emotional. Anybody who's addicted to food, or believes they're addicted to food, knows what an emotional ordeal this is. You know, there's a lot of tears, there's a lot of frustration, there's so much shame. We talked at the very beginning about working on not shaming yourself, but saying, this is something that's more powerful than any one person. I'm working toward that. I'm working toward recovery. I'm finding other people. I'm finding support, and I'm developing skill power. So there's nothing about this that makes you a bad person. A lot of people who suffer from any addiction carry a lot of shame. We've talked about that. And shame is the feeling that I'm not okay. For whatever reason, there's a feeling inside of me that says, I'm not okay. And that is absolutely A, not true, and B, has nothing to do with your addiction, other than sometimes we use that thought in a negative thought, feeling, behavior pattern and cycle to give ourselves an excuse to return to eating. Because a lot of the time, which we talked about last week, we don't want to give up our addictions. We want to hold on to them because they serve a protection. But my point to you is that as an adult, you do not need this protection. What you need is to put on your big girl and your big boy panties and learn the skills and say, I want this more than I want the misery of being staying in this food addiction. So I want the freedom from this, where my brain is hijacked and my efforts are focused all on food and weight and recipes and Food Network. I want to be free from that world to experience my life fully. This is not because you're a bad person. This is not about morality or willpower. All right. So it's physical, it's emotional, and for many people it's a spiritual or an essence or a being because of that sense of shame or I'm not enough. All right? But today, the reality is that people who have addictions to food simply are not able to eat like people who do not have food addictions. So part of it, the acceptance part of tonight's talk, is about coming to accept that, yep, I'm one of those. I'm one of those. And like I said, if you don't like the word addict, I don't care. This isn't about the terminology. It's about the healing. It's about finding a way to live life more fully, not bound by the insanity that comes around food. So the reality is, like Tenny McCarty says, if you can't take it or leave it, you're probably addicted to it. If you can't quit, and here's what I tell people a lot of times in my evaluations, it's like you've been told, not you, but sometimes you specifically, but a lot of you have been told your weight is to such a point that your comorbidities related to your disease of obesity are going to kill you. You've got hypertension, you've got extremely high cholesterol, you've got type 2 diabetes, you've got sleep apnea, you've got, really bad asthma, whatever it might be. You've been told that if you don't lose some of this weight, you're not going to live to a full life expectancy. And yet you can't stop. That to me says addiction more than anything else. If you know something's a problem and you know the problem is caused by this something, in this case food, and you can't stop, that's addiction, right? And we have to come to accept that. As much as I thought I could control this with willpower, as much as I thought that word didn't fit for me, again, don't use it. Say it, food's a problem for me. I don't care. Just get the help, right? So most of you, but not everybody, can identify specific foods. But there are some, and for some of you it's food categories that make you different from people who don't have this reaction to food. I know I've shared with you that my reaction to alcohol, to pain medication, was not like that. It is to every other person, because instantly I knew I wanted more of it. Instantly I knew it changed who I was. Not really, but I did have a reaction to it. For me, with alcohol, there was no off switch. For some of you, with sugar, with white flour foods, there's no off switch without complete abstinence. So no matter how long, they say in OA, and no matter how much you abstain, you still will always have this as part of who you are. I know there are some people in different recovery circles who believe that, people who have alcohol addictions can go and drink what they call normally at some point. I'm not here to judge, I know that I could go to dinner and have a glass of wine and not be completely drunk the next day, but I know the minute I put alcohol in my mouth, that becomes an option. And the minute I feel that feeling, the one that you get from certain foods, I know I'm going to want more of it. And so I believe, as do many of these recovery programs, in complete abstinence from certain foods. I also know it's difficult, and we've talked ad nauseum about how much more difficult it is when you have food addiction, because food is everywhere. But I'm telling you, for every person who is tempted to type in or write into me or message me that it's more difficult with food because you have to eat to live, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to agree with you. That's the fair part of this. This is tough. Food is an absolute need for every single one of us. You do have to eat to live. But the firm part of me is going to say, but you can live without sugar. You can live without foods that you add sugar to, that you make with white flour. If you have a sort of allergy, or your brain and your body don't respond well to those, you can live without those. So I'm not real sympathetic to that in terms of firmness. Fairness, yes, I totally get it. But I also know it can be done, because there are a lot of you who have been doing this for weeks and months and even years. So, all right. Addicts crave. Addicts crave these things. Just like drug addicts crave drugs, or compulsive shoppers crave that high when they get, or gamblers crave that high about gambling when they're gambling. And it's not always the actual engaging in the behavior. A lot of times it's simply the thinking about it. There's a lot of research with sex addiction that shows that just the process of getting ready to go, whatever your thing is, whether it's be online and engage in pornography sites, or if you're one of what do you call those people? Well, flasher, yeah. Just the thought of doing that, if you're an addict, gets those brain chemicals going, and that's part of addiction, is wanting to feel better, getting more dopamine surges in your brain. So, all right, now let's see what else I want to talk about. Okay. All right. Here's the deal. If you don't engage in those problematic foods, let me shut this thing off. If you don't engage in those problematic foods, you won't have the cravings. And that kind of quiets things down. And when that quiets things down, the bondage in your brain, your brain is taken hijack. Your brain, they call it the hijacked brain. They call addiction brain the hijacked brain, because you're really not thinking clearly. But when you engage in abstinence, you are better able to think more clearly, to utilize the skills that you're developing with your skill power, right? Okay. And again, we talk in the Overeaters Anonymous book, they talk about it's not just a physical thing. The obsession with food. No amount of self-control or weight loss could cure us, they say. So it's like a lot of people think when I lose the weight, I'll be happy, or when I, get to a certain size, I can relax about it. But then they find out that that's not true, because there's an obsession. It's that compulsion and that obsession and that craving that are all part of the addiction, which makes food addiction like other addictions. No matter what the resolutions, they say sooner or later we always engage again. And it just spirals into being that out of control, right? The mental obsession is not something you can get rid of by yourself. So in the 12-step programs, they talk a lot about higher powers, or, powers stronger than yourself. I don't care one iota if you believe in God, if you're spiritual at all. Because the thing that's more powerful than you are is a group of people. For some people, it's God. For some people, it's time alone reading. For some people, it's being in nature. I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you're religious or not. What I care about is that you realize that if you attempt to recover or find freedom from addiction by yourself, it's going to be a heck of a tough journey. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm going to say that most people are unable to do it alone. So by finding each other, by participating in the groups, by posting your successes in the group, by sharing with others, you have something, more energy, that's more powerful than you. That's why on my website I say we don't denial. That's another thing about addictions. Most people have some denial about being an addict or struggling with an addiction. It's a process to come to terms with. And I'm not saying that everybody's an addict. You can benefit from these skills, the skill power, without being a food addict. It's just a healthy way to live. I may have shared with you, I had a very, very good friend years ago, and she was struggling to decide if she thought she was an alcoholic, because we got that mental thing that says, I don't want to be that, right? So she was talking to her physician about it, and the physician, wise physician, said to her, you know what? It doesn't matter if you're an addict or if you're not, because the 12 steps are an amazing way to live life. And I have to say that I fully agree. So I could care less if you're an addict or not. A diagnosis is not important to me. What's important to me is you becoming free from this bondage, this obsession, this compulsion, these cravings, this mental turmoil that food causes you. And if you choose to read through, implement the 12 steps, which offer a tremendous number of skills, then you're going to be doing yourself a favor, whether you have any addictions or not, because I'm telling you, it's an amazing way to live, whether or not you have addictions. All right, so here's the deal. If you are an addict, though, if you truly believe you're an addict, and you meet the criteria from the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which we've talked about, and you can just look it up. They give you the scoring key, everything. Or you read other things about any kind of addiction, and you're like, yeah, that's me with food. Okay? Then it's going to help you tremendously by just saying, yep, that's me. The denial thing, remember how we talked the last couple weeks about trying to swim upstream and how hard it is and how exhausting it is and how you're really not going to get anywhere. And hopefully you read the blog post that I wrote about I'm an addict, what a relief. And I say that, and I'll repeat it, because when it sunk into me that, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, I felt the most relief I have almost ever felt in my life. And it's because it wasn't an excuse. It wasn't, oh, I can say, well, what'd you expect? I'm an addict. Well, of course I'm doing this. I'm an addict. No. I'm fully responsible for everything I ever do, whether I was under the influence or stone cold sober. I'm responsible for everything that I do. But what it helped me to understand was why I continued to make these unhealthy decisions in my life when I knew that's not what I wanted, when it was moving me in a direction that I didn't want to go. Remember, I said, define what's meaningful to you about your health and your eating. And then ask yourself, if I engage in this pizza, will it move me closer to or further from where I say I want to go? Or if I skip exercise today, will it move me closer to or further from where I say I want to go? So, for me, the relief that came from understanding I'm an addict helped me to understand why I kept moving in the direction that I didn't want to go, going against my own values, waking up going, I did what? Oh, God. Just that horrible feeling that adds to the I'm not okay. And then we got that spiral going because I'm not okay. Look what I did. I feel like worse than I did about myself yesterday. So I go to what made me feel better. And in some cases, it's food. In some cases, it's other things. And so that vicious cycle. So until I abstain from that substance, am I better able to utilize these skills that allow me to make healthier decisions, trust my brain, because it's not all fogged out, and move in the direction that I say I want to go. So, there we have that, right? All right. So, they say in Overeaters Anonymous, we're encouraged to take a good look, take a good hard look at our eating behaviors, at our self-destructive behaviors, at our behaviors that are harmful to other people. I reposted something somebody posted in the Food Addiction Fair and Firm group online today on Facebook because it was so wise. And the woman was talking about what a self-centered disease addiction is. And she was referring to her own food addiction. And for so long, we don't think we're harming anyone else. But part of the recovery process is to realize that, oh crap, it's not just my health I'm hurting, but I'm hurting my loved ones. They're afraid for me. They live in fear that they don't need to live in. They see me making choices that are not good for me, and they're frightened, and they don't know how to approach me, because if they approach me, I snap at them, and then their feelings are hurt, and then I feel bad, and then it's, that negative spiral on and on and on. So, abstinence is not recovery. Abstinence is the very tip of the iceberg of recovery. Recovery, in my book, recovery is learning to live without the addictive behavior or substance and learning to heal the relationship with yourself. Because underneath all addiction, there's shame. And shame is what says, I'm really not a big fan of myself. Now, that's not overall. You might feel very proud of yourself in many areas of your life, but somewhere inside there's this nagging, something's not right with me. And that's that whole vicious cycle that gets us back to using, back to blah, blah, blah. So, what I want you to do And what I'll be posting about, and this will be kind of, we'll move on from this control issue next week, but we'll talk more about, this denial and coming to accept that if you've got a problem with food, you've got a problem with food. You don't have to defend yourself or explain yourself, or it's a problem. Let's not focus on the problem. Focusing on the problem is not a place to live. Let's focus on the healing. So let's focus on the ways to deal with this problem. But if you have an addiction, the first thing that you've got to be willing to do, and I say willing, that goes back to attitude. Am I willing to give it up? Am I willing to feel the fear, to feel the discomfort, to feel whatever it is I don't want to feel, to face whatever it is I don't want to face, and let the healing happen for me? So you have to be willing to give up the addictive behavior or substance. So I want you to think about using the group more to help you on those tough days. I want you to think about focusing on the cure. The cure. They used to say, I took the cure, it didn't work. No, there is no cure, there's no pill, there's no lobotomy. This is a process of learning to accept you, to accept that you don't have to be perfect, to accept that shame is a part of all of us, and we can not let the shame drive our bus to unhealthy behaviors. That's what recovery is about. So I want you to think about, what's not okay about me? And is that really true? Talk back to those negative thoughts. Talk back to that stinking thinking. Week 1, I said, if I could give you a gift to take home with you right now, it would be the gift of no more stinking thinking. Because the worse you talk to yourself about yourself, the worse you think about yourself, to yourself, the more difficult this is going to be. So just remember the stop sign. Stop tormenting myself. Today, from now on, I refuse to talk to myself in that kind of way. That's mean, it's cruel. I don't like it when other people judge me or victimize me, and I won't do it to myself. All right, guys. There's so much. I swear I could do this for days on end and never quit talking. Well, Anyhow, let's go with the flow. Let's develop our skill power. Remember, I'm your recovery conscience. You're going to hear me saying, say to food, not right now, maybe later, not right now. You'll hear me saying, move in the direction you want to go. Move in the direction you want to go. So, today, be fair, kind, loving with yourself, be firm with yourself, and let's continue forward in this journey together. These videos, well, the video won't. Well, the video will. And or the audio will be posted on my YouTube channel. Just search Connie Stapleton. And I am also turning this Food Addiction Fair and Firm into a podcast with the same title. So that will be up and running soon, so you can listen in your car. Again, please share this with your friends. This is not just for people who have had weight loss surgery. This is for anybody who struggles with addiction. It's for anybody who struggles with food addiction. I will see you next week at the same place. And thank you again for sharing your time with me, for being willing to take the time for yourself. See you next week, everybody. Have a good one. Make it a good one. Good night.